This pattern is called the mother shucker. So you want to be really careful in how you enunciate. I've got a size 14 hook in the vise using Superfine Nano Silk 18-aught gray. This is much bigger than what you will typically tie this on. I'll usually be on a 18, 20, or 22. But we're going to go ahead and take our thread all the way back here to where the barb of the hook would be. It's a barbless hook, so it's where it would be. So the first material that we'll tie in is going to be some razor foam in a dun color. This is what razor foam looks like. I've already prepared a piece here. I've tapered it on the end. It's going to represent the shuck on this fly. And I want the width to be about the same as the gap of the hook. So with that being the shuck, I just wanted to barely hang over the back end of this fly. I'm going to kind of hold that in place. We'll take one wrap just so that we get a good idea of where we are. Make sure that that shuck is the length that we want it, and that looks good. So I'm going to take one more wrap here. Then I'm going to pull the razor foam material backwards. We're going to take a couple of wraps forward. Then I'll lay that back down, and we're going to pull on the razor foam a little bit just to stretch it out, because we want smaller body segments here at the back. Be careful, you pull it too hard and it'll rip right in half. So I've got that segment in place, and we're just going to alternate doing that. We'll come back up a couple more wraps with our thread. Go ahead and throw that over the top with putting some pulling pressure on that razor foam here. We're creating a little bit bigger segment on the next one. We're going to go forward on our hook, a few more wraps. This time I'm not going to pull on the razor foam at all. I want this to be my biggest body segment right here. And that's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to come in and begin trimming off the foam here, just with a couple of snips with my scissors. Just like that. I'm going to just clean this up a little bit with a few thread wraps, and they will, being foam and being razor foam, these wraps are going to compress that material. It'll compress it right up against the shank of the hook, so you're not getting much of any kind of a profile on that. So next we're going to just take a piece of dun saddle hackle. I've already got it prepared and stripped, very long feather, so I can use this for a lot of flies. And I want to tie that in right where that back body segment is. I'll just take a couple of wraps there to get it in place, and then I'm going to adjust a little bit there. And with that, I'm just going to move up forward on the shank of the hook here, not quite to the eye. Leave myself a little bit of space. Then I'm going to take that balance of the feather, and I'm going to tie it backwards. And that will just help us secure this one, so when we tie in our hackle, it'll be pretty secure. So with that, I'm just going to come in with my scissors, and I'm going to cut the balance of the stem of that feather off right close. Just like that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take some Superfine dubbing here, and I'm going to just dub this on my thread with my fingers. This is a little bit of a variation on this pattern that I just prefer, to actually use the hackle and some dubbing here. Being Superfine, it's going to help us create a nice tight body, but also a really tight area for our hackle to sink into. So I'll just keep tightening that up. We get it to right where I want pretty much the hackle to be tied in. So now that I've got all that in place, I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to use hackle pliers here just because this feather is so long. We're just going to take some touching wraps of the hackle. We'll just bring that right up through that dubbing, moving towards the front of the fly. Once I get to about there, I'm going to take my thread and actually back it off a few thread wraps, holding that hackle still straight up in the air. Just going to take a wrap over the top of it. That's going to secure that hackle in place for me. I'll take one wrap in front of it as well. And with that, I'm going to turn to my bodkin here. It's got a hollow end on it, which I really like to use when I'm doing a hackle like this on a fly. Just going to put a half hitch into that. I'm going to put that hollowed area just right over that eye. And the nice thing about the hollow is I can actually push some of those fibers back. I've got a couple of knots on there now, so that hackle's not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to come back in and take a look, really close look at where this hackle is connecting, and we'll try to cut it off as close as we can. Like so. All I'm going to do at this point is, using that same tool again, just going to throw in a few more of these half hitches. And we're doing this instead of whip finishing here. So once I have those fairly well done and in place, I'm going to actually grab my whip finisher because I've got a nice cutting tool on the other end of it. Turn my vise a little bit sideways so I can see where the thread is, and we're going to disconnect. So the last thing that I'm going to do with this is I'm going to turn it upside down, and I'm going to cut kind of a V out of the bottom. So I'm going to try to trim this hackle in the bottom. And that's just going to help this ride a little bit lower in the water. Because this is kind of an emerger, kind of a pattern, especially with the shuck on it. It means it's just barely hatching at this point. So take a look there. I am satisfied with what I'm seeing there. So there you have it. This is the mother shucker, great midge pattern. Pretty easy to tie. I do kind of do it my own way with the dubbing and actually running the hackle like a regular hackle, but give it a shot.